Election has shifted the political sands once again. No less than 70 local governing councils are hung, meaning that many more South Africans will live under coalitions. That's well over double the 29 councils that required coalitions after the last municipal polls. At the results announcement last night, President Cyril Ramaphosa said voters clearly want political leaders to work together. But is that possible? Some coalition governments have worked, but many have been very fractious over recent years with dire implications for service delivery. Let's discuss now. We're joined by Professor Susan Booysen, who is a political analyst. She's also the editor of Marriages of Inconvenience, the politics of coalitions in South Africa. Thank you, Prof, for being with us. You've written recently that coalitions now, given what we've seen, must be anchored in workable agreements. From what we've seen in Nelson Mandela Bay, for example, Johannesburg over the last 5 years, is it possible to say now what doesn't work and then what will work?
Well, Francis, we have got some indications. Whatever is available, however, is not a magic wand that is going to guarantee stability in these governments once they come into place. And a coalition agreement, if done correctly and formalized correctly, can certainly be a very important instrument to help stabilize multi-party government, even when those parties haven't always been on the same side of the ideology or haven't always had the same policies. But if there is an agreement, a formalized one, properly negotiated and sufficient time given to negotiate it, then it could go a long, long way. It's very important, though, that such agreements should not just only speak about nice principles and values, although agreement on those will certainly go a long way towards success in agreement. But agreements should also be very explicit about the policies and especially the programs that will be pursued and the totality of what is in this formalized agreement, which I also argue has to be fully public. But what is in there must be the totality of what has been agreed to the parties. There mustn't be some supplementary backroom deals, opportunities for patronage, for tenders, for all kinds of contracting through which political parties are known very often to benefit. Those must be specifically excluded. And these parties that enter into the agreements really have to be totally transparent with the people who elected them, who gave them partial mandates, because those people who elected them do not want to see all those values and desires, policy needs that they've invested into that party to go out the back door once that party enters into a coalition.
Professor, I want to talk about, you've actually come up with a practical example of what should be agreed upon, but very quickly, SALGA, the Local Government Association, is initiating some sort of framework for coalition agreements. They spoke to my colleague Vuyo at the Results Operations Centre. Is that where it should begin, or is this something that should be more organic and come from the parties themselves?
I've seen the document, and I think it is a useful starting point in that it's very politically educational. It outlines the coalition process and formation process step by step to constituencies in these local governments. 70 of them, almost a third of those who were elected this week, but all 70 of them, the basic steps are outlined there. And there's a nice differentiation between the process of negotiating these agreements and actually practicing coalitions when in government. However, I also think there are a few flaws in there. For example, there is one point where it specifically makes provision for the kingmakers to be rewarded, for those rewards to be organized. But it doesn't say those must be public. But that doesn't really can matter that much. But it's important that the political parties that enter into coalitions must not expect these rewards. We've seen very many backhanders that have been exchanged in the process 2016 to 2021
what
of those
sort of
coalitions
rewards
taking place. For example, a control over a certain portfolio. Let's say, for example, transport. It could be local housing. And then through its control of that portfolio, political parties have been known to not necessarily doing something illegal in the strict municipal contract sense, but then perhaps expecting those companies who do come in and provide services to a municipality to give a little retainer to the political party to help maintain good relations. In many municipalities, that type of deal has not been unknown. And we do not want to see that interface between coalitions and corruption further developing. We have seen many cases too where the bureaucracy gets interfered with. The bureaucracy itself is not always very clean, but bureaucracy gets interfered with by the politicians and say, take this and that decision.
Yeah.
And if a contract is agreement is completely transparent, that will not necessarily be eliminated, but opportunities for that kind of deal will be minimized and voters will be able to extract more accountability because they would not send their parties in there to be parts of corrupt deals.
Yeah, and like you say, if it's public, then we can hold parties to account. We can see when coalitions go wrong, why they're going wrong, what's happening. I want to throw in one quick question. We're running out of time. You say that agreements must be founded on principles and values. Let's just look quickly at an unlikely possibility. But it's not completely outlandish that the big parties get together, the ANC and the DA, and they work together and leave the small parties in the dust and they look at service delivery. The politicians have pointed out they don't agree on many things like transformation. Could they put something like that aside and say on a policy level we won't work together nationally, but we can come together at a local level to get the services delivered? Would that be viable at all?
I certainly think so. Because not only would there be a relative proportionality in that system, and it wouldn't be a micro party without a reasonable constituency who gets outlandish power in the municipal executive, for example, but it would be two parties with roughly equal or both biggish constituencies that come together. That is one advantage. And the other one is that there will just be more stability and more focus on governance, because truly party politics and big policy issues have limited value at the local level, especially when it comes to provision of basic, in terms of what land could be made available. On those kind of issues, there could be some limited dispute. But on the bulk of municipal issues and municipal programs, there is very little difference, except perhaps on which constituency certain more funds should be allocated to. For example, let's say road infrastructure should be in suburbs or should be in townships, that kind of thing. But I think on all cases, it is very easy for political parties to get to compromises on that.
It's an interesting scenario that's never happened before. Thank you very much for your time tonight, Professor Susan Booysen, who is a political analyst and, of course, has written extensively about coalitions. Tsepiso.